All right, let's continue to session 2. Session 2 is about training leaders. This is now 11 o'clock EMMC time. And we'll go till about 11:50 or so with the panel, and then I want to open it up a little bit more for Q&A as well as for the smaller group discussions. So let's see what we can do there. In your leadership training, what kind of training have you received as a leader? When we talk about training leaders, there's not just one way of training leaders. There's at least 3 ways that are quite common in training people, training leaders. There's what we call the informal way of training. This is what you learn about through your ministry experiences and in your relationships and conversations with other leaders, perhaps. That would be considered informal training. Non-formal training is what we're doing right now. Workshops, panel discussions, seminars, video, online, ministry development opportunities. That's what we would consider non-formal. So it's instruction, but it's not for college credit or those kinds of, seminary credit, those kinds of things. And then formal studies, that's more the standard, that kind of the traditional college or seminary training for leadership. And all 3 of these are valuable in producing, in training leaders. So, what kind of training did you receive in those areas? And then the second question tied to that is, how do you then do that for your leadership training as well? So we'll start with Henry, and then Esteban, and Abe, and then Norm.
Well, most of my training has been just hands-on. I've been very fortunate to work with people who are very forgiving, who are very lenient in allowing me to make mistakes. And I think church ought to be a place where we can make mistakes and learn from them. So I've been very fortunate to be in environments like that, where people saw value in me, they saw giftedness, and they allowed me to do something. And it's not always in necessarily spiritual leadership, but events, different things, just serving alongside others, different ways of observing, working under other leaders. So most of my earlier training has been in that, and then starting as a deacon, just kind of hands-on, and my wife and I are both kind of entrepreneurs type of people. We're pioneer type of people, and so we like to do new things. We like to push a few buttons here and there. And again, back in Seminole, Texas, when we did that, we explored different ways of being deacons, and it caught on. It was healthy for us. It stretched us, but it also, at the same time, when we do those type of things, we see our own weaknesses. We see our own lack of wisdom, our inabilities, and so forth. And so that's what prompts us then to get other training. And so I've done very little non-formal training during those years. That has come later. But then through all our informal learning, realizing our weakness and our how inadequate we are, through the nudging of Al and Anita and our pastor in Seminole, we then enrolled at SBC, and that's where we got our formal training. And so then after that, at SBC, one of the key things that I learned at SBC, and I think this is the one nugget above all others that I've taken from my formal training, is that I've learned to be a student. Rather than to be a leader, I've learned to be a student. And what I mean by that, I've learned to be a student of Scripture, but I've also learned to be a student of people. So when I'm with people, I'm always observing, I'm always studying people. When I go to the airport, I study people. When I'm in crowds, I study people. When I'm interacting one-on-one, I'm studying people. And so I've learned to be a student. And with that, I also, again, realize I have more weaknesses. And one of the key non-formal ways of study is with the Scope Leadership. And this has helped me to understand my co-workers, learning to work with different personalities. So that's kind of the background of my learning. And then, again, hands-on, pastoring in Shipyard. Man, we had a gracious congregation. They were so forgiving. They allowed us to explore, and they allowed us to make mistakes. and working with the region over there with the radio station, man, they just allowed me to do things that spread my wings and try things, and it worked. But sometimes we need to do that. So how do I do it? I like to see the potential in people. I like to assume the best in people. So I like to give opportunities. So when people tell me that they have a desire for something, then I challenge them to actually find ways of applying it. I'm hesitant to just give them pulpit space, but there are so many things that they can do in church. They can do things in the community. They can rub shoulders with people that will challenge them. So I look for ways to give them opportunities to actually learn in the context of a group environment and to hopefully fail. One of the things I did with the radio station when I was training the guy, Ron Rempel, he's here this morning to take over, I would actually set up scenarios where I would manipulate the software to where it would create problems, to where he would have to brainstorm. So it's just hands-on learning. And then, it shows him his inability, and then what do I need to learn? So, yeah.
Ok. En el estudio informal, yo creo que el hecho de caminar conmigo, el pastor, ha sido muy importante.
So I think as far as informal learning, just walking alongside a pastor for me has been very helpful.
Porque uno aprende de la experiencia del hermano mayor.
Because I learned from the experience of an older brother.
Recuerdo un pastor en México que se le acercó un joven y le dijo que quería prepararse para el ministerio y quería servir en la iglesia.
I remember a pastor from Mexico who had a young man come up to him, up to the pastor and say, I would like to prepare myself and serve as a pastor.
Este era un joven que estaba saliendo de la drogadicción.
There's a young man who was just coming out of drug addiction.
Y entonces el pastor le dijo, ok, ¿quieres servir en la iglesia? ¿Quieres trabajar? Entonces, ¿estás dispuesto a todo?
And so the pastor said to him, all right, do you want to serve in the church? Are you willing to do whatever you need to do?
Ok, mañana te espero entonces para que vengas a limpiar la iglesia, 2
Oh.
horas antes que empiece la reunión.
Okay, so tomorrow morning I want you to show up at the church to help clean the church 2 hours before the meeting will begin.
Y así va a ser por todo el año,
And that's what we'll do for a year.
que acomodes todo para que esté todo listo para la reunión.
I want you to clean things so that everything is cleaned up and ready for the meetings.
Y el joven aceptó el desafío y fue responsable en lo que se le asignó.
And the young man accepted that challenge and was responsible in his duties.
Ahora es director de un centro de rehabilitación.
And today he's a director of a rehabilitation center.
Lo mismo hizo mi pastor conmigo. Yo le digo, quiero servir en la iglesia.
That's the same thing that my pastor said to me. I said, I want to serve in the church.
Ok, me vas a acompañar a visitar entonces para ir a orar por las personas, me dijo.
He said, okay, you'll come with me to do visitations. We're going to go and pray for people.
Te espero mañana 2 veces a la semana, a las 3 de la mañana aquí en mi casa.
I want you to, we're going to go out 2 mornings a week. I want you to come to my house at 3 a.m.
Y de 3 a 5 a 6 de la mañana visitábamos 2 hogares.
And between 3 in the morning to 6 in the morning, 5 or 6 in the morning, we would go and visit 2 homes.
Porque no se lo encontraba a la gente en el día.
And the reason we went that early is because the people weren't home during the day.
Y en mi primera experiencia pastoral,
In my first pastoral experience,
resulta que era gente que trabajaba en agricultura.
these are people that worked in farming.
La gente ni bien amanecía, se iba y cuando anochecía regresaba a casa. No había nadie en el día, solo las mujeres.
So in that setting, as soon as there was a bit of daylight, they headed out to their fields and wouldn't come back till dark.
Entonces yo recordé que iba a visitar con mi pastor a las 3 de la mañana.
So then I remembered when I went out to visit with my pastor at 3 a.m.
Así que tuve que hacer eso y así discipulamos a 15 varones.
And so that's what I had to do, and in that way we were discipling 15 men.
Y en un año se bautizaron.
And they got baptized after a year.
Entonces ese es un entrenamiento informal que yo recibí.
That's an informal type of training that I received.
Y la segunda pregunta acerca de lo informal, entonces yo en mi vida pasada había abandonado el estudio.
And so as far as non-formal training, there's a time in my life where I just left learning, or I wasn't studying anymore.
Yo vivía para ganar solamente mi salario y poder disfrutar el fin de semana.
I was just living life to earn a wage and working for the weekend.
Pero cuando conocí al Señor,
When I got to know the Lord,
cambió totalmente.
that totally changed.
Entonces empecé a mirar, estudiar, leer, leía libros, hacía de todo.
I began to read and look for material and find material. I was reading everything I could find.
Leía muchos libros, inclusive de matrimonio, y era todavía soltero.
I read a lot of books on marriage as well, and I was still single.
Aprovechaba todo.
I wanted to learn everything I could.
Y en la tercera, entonces, lo primero que hice es ir al seminario.
And so as far as the third way of study, the formal studies, I went to the Bible school.
4 años.
4 years I was there.
En los 4 años no llegué ni una vez atrasado al seminario.
And in those 4 years, I didn't arrive late to class, not even once.
Recuerdo que una vez me falté porque me enfermé y no podía caminar.
I remember one time where I was sick and I wasn't there. I wasn't able to walk, so I didn't go to class.
No tuve ni una materia aplazada ni nota.
I never failed a class or had low grades.
Fui responsable.
I was responsible.
Y luego salí del seminario y continué estudiando.
And when I left Bible school, I continued to study.
Tengo 32 años de convertido aproximadamente.
I've been a believer for about 32 years.
Y creo que estudié en mi vida cristiana 20 años formalmente.
And during those years, about 20 years that I've been studying in a formal fashion.
Seminario de Hebrón, Seminario Z y Universidad Evangélica.
Okay, so in the Hebron Seminary in Santa Cruz, as well as in the SETA Seminary, and then also at the Evangelical University in Bolivia.
Y creo que necesito pasar otros 20 años más estudiando,
I think I still need another 20 years further of study.
porque no es suficiente.
It's not enough. ¿Y qué ocupa?
Ajá. Bueno, ¿y qué ocupo hoy para poder ayudar a otros ahora?
So which of those methods do I use to train others today?
Entonces trato de descubrir qué es lo que quiere hacer la persona.
I try to discover what that person wants to do.
Y empezamos siempre enviándolos a cosas pequeñas.
And we begin by sending them out to do small things.
Y luego vamos aumentándole o desafiándole a que pueda comprometerse para prepararse mejor de acuerdo a su llamado.
And we keep adding responsibilities to them and then send them out to get training in the area that will equip them.
Entonces tratando de repetir lo que hicieron conmigo, tratando de animar a otros también.
So I try to repeat what was done to me and encourage them to pursue those things.
Pero no todos tienen el entusiasmo que yo tenía para estudiar.
But not everybody has the same enthusiasm that I had when I was
Entonces
there.
uno se decepciona,
Some just get discouraged,
pero no nos queda más que volverlo a animar.
but there's nothing more that we can do than to continue encouraging them, spurring them on.
Algún día van a reaccionar
One day they're going to respond.
y algunos lo superan a uno.
And some of them go far beyond what we would think.
Y bueno, ya hay varios que son líderes o tienen empresa y ya me superaron.
And many of those are leaders, some are business people, have gone way beyond what I ever
Hay que
have.
tratar de motivar en todas las direcciones, la cuestión de animar a la gente a que se capacite mejor.
We need to be encouraging the people in whatever direction that they need to go. Just continue them, encourage them to continue on their pathway.
Ya, yo uso de todos.
I use all of those methods that are listed here.
I've had some very good teachers in my life. I've had opportunities informally to learn from others a lot. I was given opportunities to take positions that were that gave me opportunity to grow. I could sit in on meetings where I had no voice. I just listen and watch what they're doing. I've had good opportunities to work together with some very good pastors, Ed Stace, Jake Friesen, in the past, and I've learned a lot working together with them and just on the job training. And like Henry said, people have had to forgive a whole lot. and they've been very gracious, and so I've had the opportunity to learn in that way, and I think that it's very important that we do that. Non-formal ways I've read. I've started reading when I was a teenager, and I'm still reading. And people like John Maxwell or Brian Croft, those kind of people, I'm still reading them, and I've got some videos that I haven't watched yet, that I want to watch yet, that are leadership. But I keep doing this and trying to do that. And right now, I'm also a student with the SETA program. I'm together with the class, and I'll report more on that tomorrow. But in the SEAN material, it's specifically designed to train leaders, and I'm a student as well as a teacher in there, and we're working with that. So yeah, we do these things very frequently and very regularly. Non-formal, that's I guess the non-formal. And then the formal way, I've been to Bible school. I'm still a student at SBC. I don't know if you knew that, Terry.
I think I might, yeah.
They call me I have a 20-year program.
Okay.
And I'm not sure where I am at in that 20-year program, but somewhere in there, I'm still a student.
Okay, I'll get you to graduate yet.
That'll be tough maybe, but anyway, I want to continue studying. I am working with that. How am I doing training other people? I think I'm doing very similar things. I'm inviting them to come alongside and join me. Let's do this together. I'll give you opportunities. You try it, and then we evaluate and watch and see how did you do, and how could you do better, and what did you see in me? Give them opportunity to also evaluate me. And we have one guy in Bolivia, he's in Paraguay right now in Bible school, but he enjoys that a lot when he can evaluate my sermon on a Sunday morning and then tell me what he noticed. It's a lot of fun for him. And so developing this leadership thing, I think, is important. And again, that SETA program is so important in preparing leaders in our setting.
Yeah, I think my story is probably very similar to these stories, and probably most of your stories too. There's been some formal education, Bible school and seminary work, those types of things. I'm a reader like many of you are. I've gone to countless conferences, too many to speak of, those types of things, and I've spoken of them, two great mentors in my life, but I have great relationships, like many of you do, with local pastors and people in ministry and those in the marketplace. And so it's been all of that. And again, I think we could share similar stories. I think all three are important. I think all three of them are. I don't think initials after your name are. I don't mean to offend anybody in college or seminary. I think initials are great, MDivs, MCS, whatever you want to call them. I think education is important. I think lifelong learning is important. I think we need to be lifelong learners and readers and so forth. I think that's vital. I don't think that should ever stop. We are to continue to grow and mature and be sanctified, and so I think that plays a key part. The one thing that I would maybe share under the umbrella of this question, and one of the things that I have seen, at least across Canada, as I sit in and assess, I'm a part of assessment teams and training teams from a church planting context across the country. I would just say this: biblical illiteracy by those who want to be in ministry is rampant in Canada. So we need to be very careful to think that the only thing that our people are missing is just opportunity, just pragmatic opportunity, just to be involved. No, we are really, really doing a poor job across the board in training up our people to have a clear understanding of what the scriptures are. And so what I would say to you is, don't make the assumption that just because somebody wants to be in ministry that they know what the Bible is and they know their way through the Bible and how to unpack the Bible. I think that's really important. Number two, under this umbrella, is I've talked to many people over the years who want to plant churches who can't define what the church is. Like, they just don't know what the church is. What makes a church a church? What doesn't make a church? What are the key essentials? And so we need to make sure that just don't make that assumption that people know what they're doing, that they know their way around the Bible and they can lead a church. I just double dog dare you, just ask them. Just ask them. Ask them questions about the church. Ask them questions about the Bible. What is the gospel? What isn't the gospel? When should we speak in? I was just talking to a brother between the sessions. When should we speak into people's lives and say, like Paul to the Galatians, that's not the gospel. That's anathema. And you're not a preacher. You're not preaching the gospel. And so that's important too. And so, yes, pragmatic opportunity. That's very key. And I think seminaries are seeing this. Seminaries are having to recalibrate how they do life and ministry and train people up. They see the necessity of training while you're doing, right? To use that analogy that I used before, just because I read a book on heart surgery, you wouldn't want me to give you heart surgery, perform heart surgery, just because I've read the book. Even if I've read the book and wrote a paper on it, doesn't mean I'm ready to give heart surgery. Same with our people. Just because they got initials after their name coming out doesn't qualify them. They may have knowledge, but may not have any wisdom or experience. It's one thing taking a pastoral care class. It's another thing going to someone's house who has cancer and praying for them. Two different things. And so all of it is important. The coursework, important. Practicality, opportunity, experience, vital. Talking to someone who's done it, some old veteran in ministry who's done it, vital. All of it's just so important.
Why don't we pick up on that, Norm? You can continue. So what are some biblical principles or examples that are important for you as you train leaders? I'm at the 3A there. And then what is the church? And how would you see the church as working with this training process?
Yeah, I love all these questions. Well, I think the best biblical example of training is the example of Jesus. So what did Jesus do? Well, he had very formal times, right? He had very formal times. Sermons, pulling aside the 12 and really unpacking, spending a long time in the formal. And then obviously doing life together, just doing life together. Also clear expectations and guidelines. Here's what you need to do and what you don't need to do as I'm sending you out. And then there's the debriefing time. Right, there's that aspect too. There's also this willingness to go, okay, where you are on day one is not going to be where you are on day three. And in fact, they weren't really a finished product, right, after year three, not day three. And so I think that's a great model and example. I think the pastoral epistles give us a clear unpacking of how to train, what to look for, also that clear call of training up others after us to reach the next generation. Again, it's just got to be part of our mindset. To your question about what is the church, what are people really struggling with is this question. So what is the church? What makes a church a church? Well, some of the things that we see clearly in the scriptures are the role of the taught word, the role of the sacraments or whatever you want to call them, baptism, communion, the role of leadership. So you have to have some sort of leadership. Somebody referenced, maybe it was you, Titus 1, where Paul says to Titus, I want you to raise up elders in every church that we have planted. So there's that discipline. I think membership, whatever membership looks like, all of that. And also, we don't get to pick and choose who are in our churches, right? That's not the church. Right? It's the Spirit who brings together the church, 1 Corinthians 12, not us. And so 3 of your buddies going down to the beach, opening the Bible, that's not the church. You don't get to pick your church. That's an aspect of church life. But so these kinds of things, what role does worship have in your church? Those types of things. Acts 2 as a model, Acts 4 as a model. Ask your people this is just, it's so fundamental, but we have people leading the church that don't know what the church is, who don't know what the Bible is, and we call them leaders. They're not leaders, or they're not good leaders, they're dangerous leaders. And what our country doesn't need more churches. They need more good gospel-centric, bibliocentric, Christocentric churches. That's what we need.
Yeah, the question on biblical principles or examples, I think that we have to, again, if we're going to send out leaders, and this is the context of leaders, again, we have to come back to what we talked about in the first session. Are they grounded in the Word? Do they have an understanding of the gospel? Are they committed to Christ? And not only that, but we have to look at their life example. Are they people of integrity? Because you can preach all you want. If you don't have integrity, your message is going to fall flat. So you have to have a commitment to Christ. You have to have integrity. And then the third key element that I would say is, are they loving people? Because I've seen great people. They love God, they love the Word, but they have a hard time expressing love to other people. And it's interesting. If you talk with them, they would say that they love people, but they sure have a difficult time expressing that. And if you're talking to anyone and you want to share the Word of God with them, if they don't sense that you love them, they shut down. You need to have people who are actually going to love people. The love of Christ has to flow through them.
Bueno, el mayor ejemplo para desarrollar líderes igual Jesús.
The greatest example to develop leaders, of course, is Jesus.
En primer lugar, él llamó a 12 discípulos
In first place, he called 12
de
disciples
diferentes actividades que ellos tenían.
from the different backgrounds and activities that they came from.
Y en este caso, yo muchas veces acostumbro tener una lista de personas a las cuales me voy a concentrar este año.
For myself, in this aspect, I like to have I make a list of people for myself, of people I'm going to focus on for this year.
Normalmente anoto 10 personas.
I often write down 10 people.
Algunos años salgo animado, otros años salgo decepcionado.
So some year I end up being really encouraged, and some years very discouraged.
Pero
about that.
les pongo una atención especial.
But I give special attention and time to those people.
Luego Jesús pasó tiempo con los 12 discípulos,
Also, that Jesus spent time with his disciples.
3 años.
3 years.
Durante ese tiempo Él les dio el ejemplo de lo que deberían hacer.
During that time, he gave an example of what they were to do.
Orar,
Pray.
pasar tiempo con Dios,
Spend time with God,
sanar enfermos, echar demonios,
heal the sick, cast out demons,
predicar,
preach,
algunas veces ponerse duro con la gente que no está a favor de la voluntad de Dios.
and sometimes it meant putting himself in opposition to people that
Él les dio el ejem-
didn't want God.
Él les dio el ejemplo.
He showed them the example.
Y luego
Later,
los envió de 2 en 2,
then he sent them out, 2 by 2,
no solo.
not alone.
Después de enviarlo, pidió que regresaran.
After they went out, he asked them to come back.
Seguramente algunos volvieron decepcionados,
I'm sure
otros muy animados.
Some of them will have come back very discouraged, and others very encouraged.
Pero él los llamó y tomó tiempo para evaluar con ellos.
But he called them back, and he took time to evaluate or debrief with them.
Y otra vez entonces tomó autoridad y los empoderó y los volvió a enviar.
And so he again gave them authority, empowered them, and sent them out again.
Entonces ese es el modelo que trato de seguir y enseñar.
That's the model that I try to follow as well as teach.
I would agree with all of that, what's been said. Jesus was the prime example, and he did a good job. And so I'm not going to repeat what they've already said, but I think some of the principles that we need to work with, again, we need to work with their character. That they be, Paul says in 1 Corinthians 4:2, that we be faithful. We have to be constantly teaching them faithfulness is absolutely important. What God called you to is what you need to be faithful to, and demonstrate that in life. And some of those things are just simple things. If you're working with people, especially as leaders, there needs to be confidentiality, and so you don't carry around what you've heard about other people. Don't keep gossiping about the things you've learned about them. Teach them that these basic principles of what is it, how do you do ministry. And so I try to work with people, and when I give them opportunity to serve, then I also try to sit down with them and evaluate how did we do. And I think that's important, that we follow Jesus' example there, as Esteban said, that we work with them, send them out, give them a chance, and then we evaluate and help them so that they can grow.
I'll continue on with you, Abe. You were starting to answer this question already, but I'm going to just phrase it a bit differently. Number 4, in what areas of ministry do you see the most need for leadership training? Give me your top 3. Yeah, I'm putting you on the spot. Top 3, these are the kinds of things that potential leaders, it looks like they need the most, or they need the most training in.
As Norm already said, I believe we have a huge lack of biblical knowledge. I believe that's number 1. We need to disciple them by training them. What's the Bible? That, to me, I think I see this across the board. Our people don't know the Bible. They may have heard stories from the Bible. They may even have read it and been to Sunday school, but they actually don't know the Bible. So we need to teach them that. How do you study the Bible? How does it fit from one passage to another? You don't just take one verse and, this thing spoke to me today, and now this becomes a theology. You have to fit that into the whole picture. And does it fit with all of Scripture, not just this one day that I thought this was important, that kind of thing. So biblical, I would put at the very top. I think that's the number 1 need we have. A spiritual life. How do you have this spiritual life with Christ? It's not just that I attend church every Sunday and I'm good. But is there an actual spiritual life that you have with Jesus Christ, that you have a communication with Him, and that you're living a spiritual life? And of course, then your personal life follows that. I think those would be my top 3.
How about Norm? I know, surprise.
Yeah, the other thing,
statement.
so biblical literacy, illiteracy is rampant. That's certainly true. I also think we need to make sure that our people understand what biblical leadership looks like, because it's very different than marketplace leadership. I think we can learn things from the marketplace, while at the same time being very cognizant of the fact that Jesus, our leader, came to serve and not be served, and we are not above our teachers. So what does leadership in the church look like? We don't lord it over people. We are not involved for sordid gain. We shepherd the flock among us. So leadership in the church is to be very different. Doesn't mean that it can't be strong, can't have firm convictions. Jesus himself, our leader, would speak into things. He singled people out. He had his 1, he had his 3, and had his 12, and had his 70, and 120, and so forth. So I think that's important. But I think humble servant Christian leadership, right? That spiritual leadership is different. The gospel, if we just take our cues from what leadership looks like in the world today, we're going to be, even in the church today, we're going to be hurting. The gospel doesn't go anywhere in the world, including leadership, where it doesn't rub up against it eventually. And so if you have, I'm sure you've all read it, but if you haven't, Spiritual Leadership by Oswald Chambers is a must. It just has to be read. But some other books that I think are very, very helpful too. One more recently, Canoeing in the Mountains, is a great book, and may prove helpful to you as you navigate 2019 leadership in the church today, and where the church is and what leaders need to give themselves to while being faithful to the gospel. So I think just what is leadership, what is Christian leadership, needs to be part of your training program.
Bien, yo creo que el área que tenemos que empezar es la vida espiritual.
I think the area we need to start with is the spiritual dimension.
Porque si la vida espiritual está en un buen nivel, todo lo demás va a ser más fácil.
If the spiritual life of a person is good, the rest is going to be easier.
Y luego desarrollar el conocimiento.
And then we need to develop knowledge.
Puede ser, si va a ser pastor o va a ser administrador, desarrollar el conocimiento bíblico y alguna otra actividad que le ayude a cumplir bien su rol.
So if they're going to be a pastor or an administrator, they need to develop biblical knowledge and knowledge in areas that will help them to develop their role.
Y la otra área que deberíamos trabajar es en cuanto a la cosmovisión.
And the other area that we need to work on is their worldview.
Saber ubicar, para que sepa ubicarse y poder desarrollar bien el trabajo donde se le ha asignado la responsabilidad.
So that they can know how that fits in, how their role fits into the area where they will be working.
Han habido momentos que era pastor de niños
There was a time when I was a children's pastor.
Trabajaba con los jóvenes.
I also worked with the youth.
Luego fui pastor en la iglesia.
And then later I was a pastor of the church.
Y yo decía, bueno, todo me gusta. Al final de cuentas, ¿qué voy a hacer?
And I said to myself, well, I enjoy doing all of those. At the end, what am I going to do?
Y recuerdo que Darío hizo un estudio de la personalidad.
And I remember Daryl doing a study on personalities.
Y Dios, ahí entendí que Dios me dio la facilidad de poder adaptarme al lugar de trabajo.
And then I learned that God had given me the ability to adapt to different work situations.
Entonces yo creo por eso que es necesario aprender a valorar el lugar donde uno está.
And so I think that's why it's important that a person values or appreciates where God has placed us
Y desarrollarlo entonces con todo el entusiasmo ahí en ese lugar.
and develop that with complete enthusiasm.
Y yo lo defino como cosmovisión para poder entender dónde estoy.
I define that as far as worldview so that I understand what's my place in the world that I find myself in.
Voy a entender la iglesia o el ministerio
I'm going to understand the church and ministry
y las personas que están a mi alrededor.
as well as have a better understanding of the people that are around me.
Entonces, cuidar la vida espiritual,
So take care of the spiritual aspect,
desarrollar el conocimiento
develop knowledge,
y estudiar la cosmovisión donde voy a ir.
and study the environment and develop a worldview of the area of ministry that I'll be involved in.
I'm going to lump biblical and spiritual together because my spiritual life is a reflection of my biblical interpretation. The way I understand Scripture is the way I'm going to apply it, because I'm not going to go live what I believe to be wrong. Right? So if I believe that the Bible calls me to love God, to love people, if I genuinely believe that with all my heart, I'm going to do that. And it's going to be reflected in my life. So I don't know that you can separate the biblical from the spiritual. They are so intertwined. But at the same time, then you have the personal that kind of weaves right into that, because my life is a reflection of my belief. Neil Anderson said it well when he said, it's not what people say they believe that they actually believe, it's what they consistently do that shows what they actually believe. So our personal life is somehow interrelated there as well. And so I think this is the foundation of all. We can say that we love people, and if we're going to be cursing behind our back, we just genuinely don't believe that the gospel calls us to love one another. It's that simple. But then there's the other aspect of it, the organizational and the cultural. I would say that cultural is definitely a notch ahead of the organizational, because I have to know my culture, because, for example, the things that we did in a colony setting in Belize does not work here. We have to know our culture, but we have to do it from the foundational standpoint of biblical and spiritual foundation. And then we say, how do we organize within our culture? So that would be my take. Definitely, the biblical, the spiritual, and personal, they're so closely related. I don't see how to effectively separate those and then look at the culture and then organizational.
Okay, Henry, you can pick it up again. Leaders or learners? Just one thing. What are you involved in continuous learning? What are you involved in right now? What thing are you learning right now that is kind of on your leadership edge?
Yeah.
Just one thing.
Well, as we've already mentioned, we're new in a congregation. And so I spend time in Scripture, very much. But on the other leadership context, I'm studying our culture, because I have to learn how am I going to lead the people that God has placed under our care to shepherd. So that's where my focus is right now.
Abe, and then Norm, and then Esteban.
Where am I currently involved in learning? I think, like I said before, I'm in this Zeta Sean course and enjoying very much learning, even though it's mostly not new stuff, but the way it approaches it is so much, there's a lot of new opportunities to learn things there, and I very much appreciate that. So that's one of the things that I'm currently actively involved in.
Yeah, my life right now has just been this transition over the last year. And so it's been very personal for me as a leader who handed off a ministry that I planted, and the things that I've learned in that process. A lot of things being revealed in my own life, those idols that I have, the identity that I have in my ministry, dying to certain things. All of those things are key components of leadership because you want to finish strong. I'm not finished in ministry by any means, by God's grace, but I wanted to lead through my succession very well. But that process, like I said, really revealed some things about me, about how much do I truly love this ministry. Do I love it enough to leave it because God's calling me to leave even though I don't know what I'm going to? How do I serve those who are coming behind me? How do I walk out so the church feels like this is really good? We're going to miss him, but this church is in a good place. We have to die. That's the way of Christ. That's the call of Christ. We have to die. Our ministries flourish when leaders die in them. And our call to die doesn't only happen at the end, it happens throughout. Only when we die will our ministries flourish. Harvest demands, you know better than me, I'm just a stupid Vancouver kid. You know better than me about how harvests work out here, and things have to die for harvest. So I've been really learning practically in this process and really seeing my foolishness and some of my hard-heartedness, but throughout this process, God has been very gracious in comforting me in that revelation. And so it's been a hard, great process for me in this.
Algo que estoy haciendo es seguir leyendo.
One of the things that I am doing is I continue to read.
Tengo el objetivo de leer la Biblia una vez por año.
One of my objectives is to read the Bible every year.
Y un libro sobre liderazgo o algo que me ayude en mi crecimiento personal, un libro por mes.
And also I want to read one book a month on leadership or some area that will help me develop as a leader.
Now we're turning it back to you. You can ask some questions, but it's, I think, also helpful for the speakers up here to just say what you've been learning from them as well, and kind of reflecting back on what's been important to you, and what you want to take away from this. And so it can be questions, it can be comments, it can be affirmations. So let's take some time to do that. Al, I'm going to put you on the spot. You were going to say something last time, didn't get a chance, and so we'll get the mic to you.
Well, you partly answered the question I was going to ask before, but what I would like to comment on is particularly the area of as we lead by example. What you've been talking about here is what is God doing in your life, and how important that is. Like, to lead people with knowledge is sometimes helpful, but to lead them with heart. And I think we're trying to develop in our discipling process of what we're doing in the conference is to develop the shepherd heart. Discipleship can easily become a academic exercise, but I really appreciate where each of you are journeying on, and I think that is really the norm for many of us here. We're on a different stage and we're having to make decisions. And at each point, what are we learning? And I'm learning to both let go and do what Norm is doing in my stage in life, but what is it that God wants me to do with what I have? You know, and so that's a real struggle that many of us go through. And so I really appreciate the candid way in which you're approaching the whole idea of what am I learning in order to lead.
I just have a question about how your life experience has affected the way you lead? Can you point to maybe one life experience that really changed the way your outlook on how you see leadership or how you lead differently because of that life experience?
It's a great question. Because we are not all the same. We haven't had the same experiences, and so how you lead, how I lead will be very different based on that. So I think it's an excellent question. Going back to those two individuals that really made the most impact in my life, how they led me is actually how I lead now. They gave me a lot of room. They gave me a lot of rope. My second mentor always said to me, I will give you enough rope to hang yourself twice a year. And what he meant by that is take some chances and I'll bail you out. I was doing youth ministry work, college ministry work, and that was great because I would take chances and I knew my guy had my back at least twice a year. And I've tried to have that same mindset. I'm not a micromanager. I'm more of a, here's your ministry area, grow it. And then let's touch base. Take chances. Like I said, I'm not going to neatnick you. I'm not going to micromanage you. But I will be available to you as much as possible. And so my leadership has been very much, or my leadership development has been much more organic in nature, just doing life together, doing ministry together. Not a lot of formal training. If that happens, it's more over coffee or lunch. So that's my style. We have created some things at Westside over the last couple of years where we have a training program that has different tracks in it, an intern track, an apprenticeship track, and a residency track. But and Aaron has stepped out, but he has really given a lot of leadership over that, and I've just been more big picture, which I'm more of a 30,000 foot view person, I should say. So yeah, I've followed the lead of others, more organic in nature.
One other. We'll have basically two answers per question so that you can be prepared to respond. Anybody else wants to jump in?
I don't know if it's a major shift in my background, but I would say one of the key moments was I grew up very conservative. And so I kind of had the mindset that there was a right way and definitely a lot of wrong ways, right? And for me, it became much clearer when I was at SBC, realizing that there's all kinds of different ways of doing things, as long as you're biblically sound, right? Method changes. And to me, that freed me up actually to love people from all backgrounds of life. It doesn't matter who you are. We can love one another. We can worship together. We can share together. But to me, just breaking through that barrier that we don't all have to be this. We have different tracks, different backgrounds, and we're created in the image of God.
Other comments, questions?
Yeah, thanks for what you guys are saying. Really appreciate it. I can point to a couple of people in my life who were my mentors, my heroes, and who really changed the trajectory of my life, basically, because they believed in me. And I'm wondering, and I know that's not the only thing that does it, but I'm wondering how we could do that more in the local church. There's some people in the local church that have authority. They're not necessarily in leadership, but everybody knows that they have the authority to take a young guy under their wing and really help them to fly. I'm wondering how we could do that more, because as I'm overseas, 21 years overseas, I see that I do a lot of that, and I see these guys flying, and I'm wondering how we could do that more in the local church.
Can I put it back in your court there, James? What have you done internationally to do that kind of thing? Because I think that's the beauty of, I think we need to cross-fertilize what we've done locally with what we're doing internationally. I don't think it's an either or. I think we can learn some things both ways.
Yeah, well, I'm in Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. I'm working with Muslims there, and I'll just say that even in this, while I've been here, I've used this a lot, and communicating with the people that the 10 people that I'm working with, and believing in them, even in the, we have the ability to use technology to our advantage, and really putting the time in with them. I have to spend a lot of time. If I'm going to influence somebody, then I have to spend a lot of time with them. And it has to go far deeper than just theological, in my mentoring relationships. So often we get into lots of family squabbles and all kinds of things, financial decisions, and I'm not shy to get involved with them. So if we don't get into the messy stuff in people's lives, then I'm wondering, are they holding back with the stuff that they're telling us? So this is some of the things I'm experiencing there, but they have to trust me, and sometimes it takes a long time to develop that trust. They have to understand. I have to understand their language, their culture, and then what I've heard a lot, every time I come back to Morden, we've been back now for a few weeks, then I hear about my dad. Your dad loved us. I hear it all the time. So there's something that he had and he loved. And so I had the example at home to learn how to love, and people can tell in a heartbeat whether I love them or not. And sometimes when I'm cross-culturally, I'm talking in Russian or in Uzbek, and it's so difficult to do that. And I have to be careful not to try to come across as I'm the teacher and you're the student. And often I try to make it so that we're peers, and then so that I love them. So those are a couple of things that I do. But I'd love to hear from you guys too.
I'd like to jump in there and just back that. I have deliberately, it's in the church bulletin every week, that there's coffee time at 6 in the morning on Wednesday mornings, and specifically for men, and I'm there. And sometimes I'm there all by myself, but sometimes there's others. And through that, I have a number of people who are today in leadership because we've developed a relationship. They first have to find out, where am I at? Do I trust them? Do I give them the chance? And if they mess up, am I going to jump down their throat? They want to know for sure that they can trust me first before they're going to allow me to put them into a position. And so I think developing relationships is number one in putting people in leadership positions, and I've seen it a number of times in the last couple of years.
Yo trabajo visitando diferentes países de Latinoamérica
In my work involves visiting different countries in Latin America.
y lo que hacemos es seleccionar algunas personas.
What we do is we select certain people.
Los capacitamos
We train them.
normalmente en un entrenamiento de 2 semanas.
Normally we'll have a training of about 2 weeks.
Lo podríamos dar la información en 3 días,
We could give them the information in 3 days,
pero lo hacemos 2 semanas para poder llegar a ser amigos
but we take 2 weeks so that we can become friends,
y luego poder continuar una relación de amistad,
and so that we can continue in a friendship relationship
de mentoreo.
and of mentoring.
Y luego una vez al año nos reunimos con ellos
And then once a year we get together and have a meeting with them
para poder evaluar y para poder afirmar el trabajo.
to be able to evaluate and to affirm the work.
Entonces, bueno, todos ustedes conocen la situación de Latinoamérica
You know the situation in Latin America,
y no es fácil a veces convencer a la gente de que ellos pueden hacer.
it's not easy to convince people and have them understand that they can do it.
Proyectos locales,
Local projects
con gente local,
with local people,
con presupuesto local.
with a local budget.
Ese es nuestro gran desafío.
That's a big challenge for us.
Pero tratamos de concentrarnos en una o dos personas
But we seek to focus on one or two people
y le hacemos seguimiento a ellos.
and do a follow-up with them.
Y normalmente la mayoría tiene éxito en lo que se les ha
And
capacitado.
the majority will have success in the training.
Un buen seguimiento para ver los objetivos
So
alcanzados.
that follow-up and ongoing relationship to see goals being met is very important.
Let's now turn the conversation back to the tables. Get back into your table groups, and there will be a couple of questions there for you. They'll be up on the wall soon. I made 2 mistakes, and so you're going to have to forgive me. I switched it's supposed to be informal experiences and non-formal workshops on question number 1. Other than that, they're right. So go through those questions and do some discussing about how you go about training leaders. So go ahead. And lunch will be at 12:15, not 12:30 as the program stated. So thank you.